The Central Archive of the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation holds operational file number 48, containing combat logs and reports on the material technical supply of separate foreign formations for the years 1942 to 1943. On the yellowish paper of the 31st sheet, the text of Operational Order number 002 is printed in the clear typeface of a typewriter. The document is dated March 2, 1943, with a signing time of 22 hours 30 minutes. Beneath the document is the signature of the commander of the 1st Separate Czechoslovak Infantry Battalion. This order defined the procedure for the unit's advance to the forward defensive lines near the Mža River. The sheets smell of dry archival paper and the weapon oil used to preserve the folders. Every line of this document records the seconds, meters, and kilograms of supply that determined the outcome of the first battle of the Czechoslovak volunteers. Before we proceed to a detailed analysis of the archival documents, logistical schemes, and tactical maps of this large-scale operation, I ask you to subscribe to the channel. Your subscription will help us continue our research work in the archives, find unique documents, and create detailed military historical reconstructions. The military technical and economic formation of Czechoslovak military units on the territory of the USSR began after the signing of the Soviet-Czechoslovak Agreement of July 18, 1941. The practical implementation of the project was entrusted to the Czechoslovak military mission under the leadership of Colonel Heliodor Píka. The city of Buzaluk in the Orenburg Oblast was designated as the formation site for the unit. As of February 15, 1942, the personnel numbered 78 people. By September 1942, the unit's strength had grown to 974 people. The national composition of the battalion was distributed as follows: 267 Czechs, 16 Slovaks, 286 Rusyns, and 405 Jews. The Soviet side fully assumed the material provision and armament of the battalion. From the warehouses of the People's Commissariat of Defense of the USSR, 582 rifles, model 1891 to 1930, 350 PPSH-41 submachine guns, 54D P-27 light machine guns, 12 Maxim machine guns, model 1910, 18 50mm mortars, 9 82mm mortars, and 2 45mm anti-tank guns, model 1937, were allocated. The command staff was trained according to the Soviet infantry regulations of 1938 and the regulations for counter-battery warfare. The training was conducted under a strict time limit. Daily training lasted 10 hours at air temperatures that dropped to -30 degrees in the winter months. The food supply norm corresponded to the rear ration of the Red Army: 800 grams of bread, 100 grams of cereal, and 50 grams of meat per person per day. On January 30, 1943, train number 22,901, under the command of Colonel Ludvík Svoboda, departed from Buzaluk Station. The train consisted of 35 heated freight cars and 11 flat cars with heavy weapons and wheeled vehicles. The route passed through Kuibyshev, Penza, Rytišćevo, Balashov, and Valuiki. The average speed of the train was 25 kilometers per hour due to the high congestion of the railway with military cargo. The train arrived at Valuiki Station on February 19, 1943. Further advance to the front line was carried out by foot march, the battalion covered 350 kilometers in 12 days under conditions of deep snow cover and systematic enemy air activity. The speed of the foot march ranged from 25 to 30 kilometers per day. Each serviceman carried equipment weighing 32 kilograms, including personal weapons, a portable ammunition load of 120 rounds, and a daily dry ration. The physical condition of the personnel upon arrival on the outskirts of Kharkiv was assessed by medical services as satisfactory, with the exception of 14 people incapacitated due to first- and second-degree frostbite of the lower extremities. By early March 1943, the operational situation on the Kharkiv axis had sharply deteriorated. The German Army Group South, under the command of General Feldmarschall Erich von Manstein, had launched a large-scale counteroffensive. The goal of the German command was to envelop the Soviet troop grouping near Kharkiv and reach the Seversky Donets River. The Czechoslovak Battalion entered Kharkiv on March 3, 1943, where it was tasked with occupying a defensive line on the southern bank of the Mža River. The unit was operationally subordinated to the command of the 25th Guards Rifle Division, led by Major General Pavel Shafranov, which was part of Lieutenant General Pavel Rybalko's 3rd Tank Army. The length of the defensive sector assigned to the Czechoslovak Battalion was 15 kilometers along the line Mirhorod-Artyokovka-Sokolovo. Here, the first serious tactical planning error, recorded in the operational documents of the 3rd Tank Army's headquarters, becomes apparent. According to the 1939 Red Army Infantry Combat Manual, a single rifle battalion of up to 1,000 men could reliably hold a front of 3 to 5 kilometers wide under defensive conditions. Entrusting the 1st Czechoslovak Battalion with the task of blocking a 15-kilometer sector led to a critical reduction in troop density. There were less than 0.07 soldiers per linear meter of front. The command had no tactical reserves whatsoever to contain potential breakthroughs by enemy tank units. Colonel Ludvík Svoboda decided to distribute his forces unevenly, concentrating the main assets on the most tank-threatened direction in the area of the village of Sokolovo. The tactical defense scheme for the village of Sokolovo was built around the 1st Company under the command of Senior Lieutenant Otakar Jaroš. The company, with a strength of 185 men, was deployed on the southern bank of the Mža River, directly within the boundaries of Sokolovo. This decision was dictated by the need to create a forward strong point in front of the battalion's main defensive line, which was located on the northern bank of the river. The other 2 infantry companies took up positions on the northern bank, controlling the dominant heights and approaches to the crossings. The second critical planning error was related to the topographic and climatic factors of the terrain. The command had counted on the Mža River as a natural anti-tank barrier. However, archival meteorological reports for the first week of March 1943 recorded consistent night temperatures of up to -15 degrees. The thickness of the ice on the Mža River near Sokolovo ranged from 35 to 40 centimeters. This thickness of the ice cover allowed medium German T3 and T4 tanks, as well as SDK-FZ-251 armored personnel carriers, to cross the water obstacle anywhere without the use of engineer bridges. The natural defensive barrier had effectively turned into a level dirt road for the enemy's armored vehicles. Senior Lieutenant Otakar Jaroš organized the defense inside the village of Sokolovo, dividing it into 3 strong-point sectors. The 1st platoon took up positions on the western outskirts. The 2nd platoon blocked the southern direction, and the 3rd platoon dug in near the church and the local school building in the center of the village. The company's firepower was reinforced with two 45mm anti-tank guns and two Maxim heavy machine guns. The ammunition load was 120 shells per gun and 3,000 rounds per machine gun. The personnel dug full-profile trenches in the frozen ground. The depth of the trenches was 120 to 130 centimeters. Covered, slit trenches were prepared for protection against artillery fire. On March 8, 1943, at 13:30 hours, German advance patrols, belonging to the 6th Wehrmacht Panzer Division, approached the southern outskirts of Sokolovo. The German battle group included units of the 11th Tank Regiment and the 4th Motorized Regiment. Enemy reconnaissance conducted a demonstration attack with 5 armored personnel carriers to identify the firing points of the Czechoslovak volunteers. Otakar Jaroš ordered his men not to open fire until the vehicles came within 200 meters. As the armored personnel carriers entered the zone of effective fire, PTRD anti-tank rifles opened aimed fire at their vision slits and engine compartments. 2 German armored personnel carriers were damaged and stopped. The remaining vehicles withdrew to their starting positions. After the reconnaissance in force, the German artillery began a massive artillery preparation. It lasted from 1410 hours until exactly 1500 hours. The fire was delivered by 2 battalions of 105mm howitzers. The density of the artillery fire reached up to 15 shells per hectare of the village area per minute. During the bombardment, the wired telephone communication between Otakar Jaroš's command post in Sokolovo and Ludvík Svoboda's headquarters on the northern bank of the Mža River was completely destroyed. The 5 AK radio station was damaged by shell fragments. Command and control of the units was reduced to the use of signal flares and messengers. At 15:15 hours, the main phase of the assault on Sokolovo began. The enemy committed up to 60 tanks and about a battalion of infantry and armored personnel carriers to the attack. The main blow was delivered against the positions of the 2nd Platoon from the southern direction. Soviet artillery support was provided by the 295th Guards Artillery Regiment, which had 12 pieces of 76mm guns and 6 howitzers of 122mm caliber. The artillery firing positions were located 4 kilometers to the north of Sokolovo. Due to the lack of reliable communication, fire adjustment was difficult. The shells were landing 200 to 300 meters beyond the advancing formations of German tanks. German T-4 tanks, using the advantage of the range of their 75mm long-barreled guns, began to pick off the Czechoslovak firing points from a distance of 800 meters, remaining outside the effective range of the Soviet 45mm anti-tank guns. Both Czechoslovak 45mm guns were disabled by direct hits from high-explosive shells within the first 20 minutes of the battle. Their crews were completely incapacitated. The enemy infantry dismounted from their armored personnel carriers and began to outflank the positions of the 1st Company, using the folds in the terrain and garden buildings on the outskirts of the village. Here it is necessary to point out a third serious discrepancy in archival sources concerning the scale of enemy armored vehicle losses. The final report of the headquarters of the 1st Czechoslovak Battalion states that during the battle for Sokolovo on March 8th, the personnel of the 1st Company destroyed 19 enemy tanks and 6 armored personnel carriers. However, comparing this data with the reports of irrecoverable materiel losses of the 6th Wehrmacht Panzer Division for the period of March 5th to 10th, 1943, reveals a discrepancy. German documents record the irrecoverable loss of only 5 T-4 tanks and 3 armored personnel carriers in the Sokolovo area on that specific day. Another 12 vehicles sustained damage of varying severity, but were evacuated to the rear by repair and recovery groups during the night of March 9th and were subsequently repaired. This discrepancy is explained by the specifics of combat in conditions of dense urban development. The same German vehicle could be attacked by soldiers from different trenches using anti-tank rifles and KS incendiary bottles, leading to the same damaged piece of equipment being counted multiple times in the reports of different platoons. By 1630, German tanks broke into the center of Sokolovo. The battle transitioned into a phase of focal resistance in isolated buildings. A group of fighters led by Senior Lieutenant Otakar Jaroš fortified themselves in the building of the village church. The walls of the building, constructed of bricks 80 centimeters thick, withstood hits from 75mm shells of German tanks. Czechoslovak soldiers fired PPSH submachine guns through window openings and breaches in the walls, holding back the advance of German infantry. To destroy the strong point, the enemy brought up 2 Stug 3 self-propelled artillery pieces to the church building, which began shelling the structure with concrete-piercing shells from a distance of 150 meters. Otakar Jaroš received multiple wounds from fragments of stone and shells, but continued to direct the defense. At 1830, while attempting to organize a counterattack with a reserve squad to relieve the encircled 3rd Platoon, Senior Lieutenant Otakar Jaroš lost his life in the area of the village's central square. His body sustained critical damage from being run over by the tracks of a German T-4 tank. For his demonstrated courage and precise execution of his military duty, Senior Lieutenant Otakar Jaroš became the first foreign citizen to be posthumously awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. At exactly 1900, Colonel Ludvík Svoboda, assessing the operational situation based on reports from messengers who had broken through the front line, understood the impossibility of further holding Sokolovo with the forces of the 1st Company. The density of enemy fire had increased, and an encirclement of the battalion's left flank had begun. Svoboda gave the order for a systematic retreat of the remnants of the 1st Company to the northern bank of the Mža River. The retreat was covered by fire from the 2nd and 3rd Companies from prepared positions on the dominant heights. The evacuation of the wounded and the withdrawal of personnel were carried out across the river ice under continuous enemy mortar fire. By 2300, the fighting in Sokolovo ceased. German troops fully occupied the settlement, but their further advance north was halted by the organized fire of the Czechoslovak Battalion and the arriving reserves of the 25th Guards Rifle Division. The losses of the 1st Czechoslovak Battalion during the battle on March 8th amounted to 112 killed in action and 106 wounded. The material support of the 1st Company was completely lost, including 2 guns of 45mm caliber, 4 mortars of 50mm caliber, and 6 heavy machine guns. The baptism of fire at Sokolovo demonstrated the high resilience of the personnel, but simultaneously exposed problems with coordinating actions with Soviet artillery units and a critical shortage of their own heavy firepower. Based on the experience of the battles near Kharkov, the Soviet High Command decided to significantly expand the Czechoslovak contingent. On May 10, 1943, the State Defense Committee of the USSR issued Decree number 3290 on the formation of the 1st Separate Czechoslovak Infantry Brigade. The base for its formation was the city of Novohopersk in the Voronezh region. The numerical strength of the brigade reached 3,517 men by September 1943. The unit's structure underwent qualitative changes. The brigade now included 2 infantry battalions, an artillery battalion, and a separate tank battalion under the command of 2nd Lieutenant Josef Buršík. The tank battalion was equipped with 20 Soviet medium T-34-76 tanks and 10 light T-70 tanks, as well as 10 BA-64 armored cars. The artillery component was reinforced with 12 ZIS-3 divisional guns of 76 mm caliber and 6 howitzers of 122 mm caliber. This elevated the unit from the category of light infantry to that of a full-fledged mechanized formation, capable of solving independent operational tasks. In the autumn of 1943, the 1st Separate Czechoslovak Infantry Brigade was transferred to the 1st Ukrainian Front to participate in the Battle of the Dnieper and the liberation of Kiev. The brigade operated in the main thrust direction of the 38th Army under the command of Colonel General Kirill Moskalenko. On November 5, 1943, at 8 a.m., Czechoslovak units launched an offensive from the Liutej bridgehead. Their task was to break through the deeply echeloned defense of the German forces in the area of the Sirets suburb and reach the Kiev Passagersky railway station. The offensive progressed at a high pace. The brigade's tank battalion, operating in conjunction with the infantrymen of the submachine gun companies, by 1400 hours had overcome a 4-meter-wide and 3-meter-deep anti-tank ditch, constructed by German engineering units on the approaches to the city. Czechoslovak tank crews employed high-speed breakthrough tactics, using the asphalt surface of the Brest-Litovsk highway to bypass enemy strongpoints. By 16:30 hours, a T-34 tank under the command of 2nd Lieutenant Antonín Sochor broke through to the Bolshevik plant, destroying 2 enemy firing points and 1 75 mm anti-tank gun. By 2 a.m. on November 6, 1943, the brigade's advanced detachments reached the Dnieper River within the city limits, completing their combat mission. The brigade's losses during the assault on Kiev amounted to 43 killed and 112 wounded. For this success, the brigade commander, Ludvík Svoboda, was awarded the Order of Suvorov, 2nd class, and officers Antonín Sochor, Josef Buršík, and Richard Tesařík were awarded the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. The brigade's successful actions near Kiev, Bila Tserkva, and Zhashkiv served as the basis for the unit's further deployment. In April 1944, the formation of the 1st Czechoslovak Army Corps began in the area of the city of Černivtsi. The main source of personnel replenishment were the Volyn Czechs, descendants of 19th-century settlers living in the Rivne and Volyn regions, as well as soldiers of the 1st Slovak Infantry Division who had defected to the Red Army in the Melitopol area in the autumn of 1943. By August 1944, the Corps' strength exceeded 16,000 men. The organizational structure of the Corps included the 1st and 3rd Separate Infantry Brigades, the 2nd Separate Airborne Brigade, and the 1st Separate Czechoslovak Tank Brigade. The Tank Brigade had 65 T-34-85 tanks at its disposal. The Corps was a powerful operational tactical formation, fully integrated into the structure of the 1st Ukrainian Front, commanded by Marshal of the Soviet Union Ivan Konev. In September 1944, the Corps was committed to participate in the Eastern Carpathian Strategic Military Operation. The main objective of the operation was to break through the main Carpathian Ridge to provide urgent military assistance to the Slovak national uprising, which began on August 29, 1944. The offensive commenced on September 8, 1944. The Corps was to operate in the extremely unfavorable physical and geographical conditions of the Beskid mountain ranges. German troops from the 1st Panzer Army, under the leadership of Colonel General Gotthard Heinrizi, had created a deeply echeloned defense system here, known as the Heinrizi Line. The defense relied on long-term firing points carved into the rocky ground and continuous minefields on the mountain roads. During the Carpathian Dukla operation, a third and most significant planning error was revealed, leading to severe consequences for the Corps personnel. The intelligence department of the 38th Army's headquarters failed to timely detect the withdrawal of the main forces of the German 75th Infantry Division from the first line of defense to a pre-prepared second defensive line located on heights marked 534 and 694. The Soviet artillery preparation, which began at 6:40 on September 8 and lasted 110 minutes, hit the virtually empty trenches of the forward line. When, on September 9 at 7 o'clock, the regiments of the 1st and 3rd Czechoslovak Brigades launched their attack, they entered a pre-sighted kill zone in a narrow mountain valley near the village of Zindranova. German artillery and mortars, occupying the dominant heights, opened heavy barrage fire. The Czechoslovak battalions, deprived of armored support due to the inability of tanks to operate off-road, suffered heavy losses. In the first 4 hours of battle, 611 men were put out of action. The commander of the 1st Ukrainian Front, Marshal Ivan Konev, personally arrived at the Corps command post and, for indecisiveness and errors in troop command, relieved the Corps commander, General Jan Kratochvil, of his duties, appointing General Ludvík Svoboda in his place. The fighting for the key height, 534, continued from September 10th to 20th, 1944. The height changed hands 7 times. The mountainous forested terrain precluded the possibility of wide maneuvers. Combat operations were conducted by assault groups of up to a rifle platoon in strength, armed with submachine guns and RGD-33 hand grenades. The logistical support of the Corps units in the mountains was in a critical state. Due to continuous autumn rains, the dirt roads were washed out and wheeled supply vehicles were stuck in the mud. The delivery of ammunition and food to the front line was carried out exclusively by hand or using pack horses. One infantry soldier was forced to carry up to 2 crates of 82mm mortar shells, weighing 46 kilograms, over a distance of up to 5 kilometers uphill under constant enemy artillery fire. Ammunition expenditure on certain days of fighting reached up to 3 units of fire per gun per day, which caused a shell shortage due to the low capacity of the roads. The supply line was stretched, and the Corps' rear services could not keep up with moving the materiel depots forward following the advance of the combat units. Despite fierce enemy resistance, on October 6, 1944, at 6 o'clock, units of the 1st Separate Czechoslovak Infantry Brigade captured the Dukla Pass by storm and crossed the state border of Czechoslovakia near border marker number 36. This day entered history as the day marking the beginning of the liberation of the homeland of the Czechoslovak volunteers from occupation. The national flag was raised at the border post. However, the fighting in the Carpathians did not end there. The Corps became bogged down in protracted positional battles in the Ondava River Valley, which lasted until January 1945. In total, during the Carpathian Dukla operation, the 1st Czechoslovak Army Corps lost the lives of more than 1,600 servicemen, with more than 4,000 people wounded to varying degrees of severity. 24 T-34 tanks and 18 artillery pieces of various calibers were irrevocably lost. In the final stage of the war, from January to May 1945, the 1st Czechoslovak Army Corps took part in the West Carpathian and Moravian Ostrava offensive operations. The Corps' numerical strength continuously increased due to the mobilization of the male population in the liberated territories of Sub-Carpathian Ruthenia and Slovakia. By April 1945, the unit had transformed into a powerful army group of over 60,000 men, comprising 4 infantry brigades, 1 tank brigade, an aviation regiment, and a powerful artillery force. One of the most difficult episodes of this period was the battle for the town of Liptovský Mikuláš in northern Slovakia. German forces had turned this town into a powerful defensive stronghold, blocking the exit to the Mža River valley. The battle for the town lasted from January 30th to April 4th, 1945, a total of 62 days. The defense was held by units of the German 1st Panzer Army and remnants of the 1st Hungarian Army. The advance of the Czechoslovak Corps was hampered by a shortage of large-caliber ammunition. The mountain passes were mined, and the only highway was under constant fire control by German artillery. The capacity of this supply route did not exceed 300 vehicles per day, while the Corps' minimum operational requirement was 700 vehicles carrying fuel, lubricants, and ammunition. The town of Liptovský Mikuláš was only taken by storm after a deep flanking maneuver by the Soviet 24th Rifle Division, which threatened to encircle the German grouping. After the breakthrough in the Mža River Valley, the Czechoslovak units began a rapid advance westward, liberating the towns of Žilina, Kroměříž, and Olomouc. On May 10, 1945, the lead motor columns of the 1st Czechoslovak Army Corps entered liberated Prague, where they linked up with the mobile tank units of the 1st Ukrainian Front. Summarizing the dry military statistical results of the combat path of the 1st Czechoslovak Army Corps requires the use of precise archival figures for material costs and losses. From March 1943 to May 1945, the formation fought its way over 1,500 kilometers. Total irretrievable personnel losses for the entire period of combat operations amounted to 4,011 men killed in action, died of wounds, or missing in action. Sanitary losses, including the wounded, shell-shocked, and those who fell ill, amounted to 14,202 men. For demonstrated heroism, more than 14,000 Czechoslovak servicemen were awarded Soviet orders and medals. The armed forces of the USSR transferred to the Corps, as gratuitous material assistance, 32,673 rifles and carbines, 13,742 submachine guns, 3,214 light and heavy machine guns, 640 anti-tank rifles, 118 tanks and self-propelled artillery mounts, 540 field artillery guns and mortars, and 48 aircraft of various types. The material and technical base, created through Soviet supplies during the war, formed the foundation for the formation of the post-war Czechoslovak People's Army. The organizational structure, training manuals, and tactical methods honed by the Corps' personnel in battles at Sokolovo, Kiev, and the Dukla Pass defined the vector of development for the Czechoslovak armed forces for the next 4 decades. The Corps' combat path demonstrated the high operational and tactical effectiveness of volunteer formations, provided they had uninterrupted logistical supply and were deeply integrated into the overall strategic framework of large front-scale formations. The documents from the combat journals and the logistical reports of the Corps headquarters remain a vital source for the objective analysis of the specifics of coalition warfare in the mid-20th century.